We are live now. Excellent. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome to Imbibe Live Online. It's supported by Mezcal Centre, and I'm Laura Willoughby. I'm the co-founder of Club Soda. We're the mindful drinking movement. And in this session today, we're going to be exploring some of the emerging consumer trends today with an amazing panel of hospitality specialists. Sorry, you see?
Are you actually live?
We are live.
I can't see you.
Sorry, my glamorous assistant is my colleague in the room next door, says he can't hear us, so I'm just double checking. I think we're good. Okay, as I said, we're looking forward to exploring some emerging consumer trends today with an amazing panel of hospitality specialists. This session is supported by the premium CBD mixer, Mr. J. And I'd like to introduce you to our awesome panel. We have Lorraine Copes here from Corbin and King, Kieran McCall from Fuller's, Smith and Turner, and Johnny Jones from CGA. Now, many of you will know that CGA collects huge amounts of data for the industry. And in order to kick off this session, they've put together an amazing presentation on the data they've collected over the last few months. So I'm going to just hand over to Johnny. Hopefully, his presentation will stimulate lots of questions from you. And you can ask a question at any time. The sooner the better, because that means I can begin to curate them to ask the panelists. So please feel free to start asking questions straight away. Johnny, over to you.
Thanks, Laura. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can.
That's great, thank you. So I'm Johnny Jones from CGA. I'm Director of Client Services. I'm just going to spend the next 10 minutes or so just talking you through some of the key consumer trends that we've seen in our research, both before and during lockdown, which should be impacting the decisions that you make around your drinks menus going forward. So just going to kick off with some of the key trends that we saw pre-COVID-19. I think it's really important to understand where we've come from and where we need to get back to as an industry. Then we're going to cover what consumers have been doing during lockdown, things that they've been doing which will shape the trends going forward, and then just ending on what consumers are planning on doing when they do return to the trade, so that we can maximise that opportunity from the drinks menu. So starting what was happening with before COVID-19, it started to impact the trade. I think one of the key things to note is that we had a consumer set who have never been more engaged with the trade, really. So footfall was broadly flat over the last 4 years, with some growth seen in eating out. And by the end of last year, we had around about half of consumers eating out on a weekly basis and a third of consumers drinking out on a weekly basis as well. And the reason for that really is that there's never been such high quality choice in the marketplace. There's some really fantastic operators there who are delivering a really high quality experience. And it's that experience which is key. That's the top driver of choice of venue, and it's the #1 success factor for operators in 2019. This is why consumers visit the trade, and it's what we need to be delivering again to make sure that they come back. But driving that footfall, there is a core group of consumers. And what we know is that 30% of all consumers make up around 70% of total visits. And actually for drinks-led visits, that's an even smaller core group of 22% of consumers making up 70% of drinks-led visits. And these are the ones that really want that experience of coming back into trade. So it's a really important thing that we can deliver that experience to bring them back. I think one of the really important ways that we can feed into that overall experience in a way that consumers tell us correlates with their experience expectations is through the quality of the drinks on offer. So what we have seen over the last 10 years is that premiumisation trend has been very strong. Value has consistently been outperforming volume above the level of inflation. And what we see now is that the quality of drinks on offer is a key factor for consumers when they're choosing where to go out to eat and drink. So 37% have chosen a venue based on the quality of the drinks on offer. And we've seen a strong growth in that number over the last 3 years. So for a successful recovery, providing the right drinks range has never been more important. And obviously premium plays a key role within that. So what we were seeing pre-lockdown is that almost 90% of all of the growth in on-trade drinks was coming through premium categories. So with reduced capacities in venues, it's key that we're maximising the trade-up opportunity to drive cash in the till and ultimately to drive profit. One of the other key trends that we were seeing pre-lockdown was a shift towards health. And what we're seeing there is consumers have never been more aware really of what they're putting in their bodies from both a food and drink perspective. So 2/3 of us are actively trying to lead healthy lifestyles. And like I say, this isn't just about food, but it's also about drink. And consumers are increasingly making choices about what to drink based on reasons associated with health. And we expect that to continue post-lockdown as well, as 89% of us during lockdown are concerned about our health during COVID-19. And actually, what we've seen from our research in China is that pre-lockdown, health was a consideration of where to visit. So 29% of consumers were choosing which venues to visit based on the availability of healthy options. But we've seen big growth in that number post-lockdown, and now 40% of consumers in China are making decisions on where to visit based on the availability of healthy options. So ensuring that we've got those healthy options on both the food and drink menu is going to be key to driving footfall and maximising spend once we do get consumers back into our venues. And the big drinks trend that's benefited or risen from this increased focus on health is the emergence of no and low alcohol as a serious category in pubs, bars and restaurants. So now 1/3 of us in the latter 6 months of 2019 had tried a no and low alcohol alternative whilst out in the on-trade, and more than half of us had been on a big night out without consuming any alcohol at all. And this isn't about abstinence, it's actually about moderation. So of those consumers who have tried no and low alcohol alternatives, less than 1 in 10 of them are teetotal. And this is very much just more about a movement towards health. And with that health agenda ramping up, it's really important that we provide those options for those that want to enjoy returning to the trade without consuming that much alcohol. And when we look at what consumers have been doing during lockdown, we can see evidence of that increased focus on health as well. So 4 in 10 of us have been exercising more. 1/4 of us have stopped buying unhealthy takeaways, and 1/4 again are buying more healthy foods. So like I said, overall 89% are concerned about health during COVID-19. So it's key to have healthy options on the menu. And this health trend has extended to alcohol consumption during lockdown as well. So what we're seeing here is while 17% are drinking more and almost half are drinking the same amount as they did prior to lockdown, more than 1/3 of consumers are now telling us that they're either drinking less or they have cut out alcohol altogether. I think the good news here is that other than health, one of the key reasons for that is that the on-trade experience just cannot be replicated at home. Consumers are telling us that they're not drinking because it's just not the same, and they're really looking forward to getting back out in trade for a drink. But for those that are still drinking, some categories have fared better than others. So within spirits, we've got whiskey, gin, rum and liqueurs, who've all done really well in terms of the proportion of consumers who are drinking them at home during lockdown compared to the proportion that were drinking them in the on-trade. And wine and lager have done really well in that respect as well. So these categories demonstrate very strong category loyalty and need to be a key consideration on the menu going forward. But at the other end of things, we've got cocktails, craft beer and ale, where they've seen a big drop off in consumer engagement. And again, in the write-ins for our research and anecdotally, consumers are telling us that that's because the experience with those categories just can't be replicated easily at home. So those are categories that consumers will have missed and they're going to be looking forward to when they get back out into trade. Overall, just about half of on-trade volume has been picked up in the off-trade during lockdown. And again, some categories have fared better than others, and wine has been the really big winner there. So actually more than 100% of the on-trade volume for wine has now been picked up in the off-trade, and the category is in total trade growth. So a real strong consideration for menus post-lockdown. One of the great things that we have seen during lockdown is that consumer engagement with the trade has really continued. So 1/3 of consumers have been actively supporting their favourite pubs, bars and restaurants, with 1/3 of those buying vouchers or prepaid bar tabs. We've seen some great initiatives there. And 1/3 of them have also been ordering delivery from their local venues. I think it's no surprise that we've seen strong growth in delivery during lockdown, and more than half of those using delivery are doing so for either the first time or more frequently than they did pre-lockdown. And we've seen premiumization within that sector as well. This isn't just about takeaways. We've seen some great initiatives such as Coat at Home or Nico at Home by 6 by Nico. And we're seeing real growth in delivery for the whole sector. And we don't see this as just a lockdown trend. We do not expect it to fall away once outlets reopen. And in fact, those who are using it for the first time or more frequently are telling us that these habits are going to continue. So 61% will continue their frequency of ordering from restaurants. And on the right-hand side, we can see that over 1/3 are likely to order from pubs if that was available in the future. And this isn't just about food either. Delivery is a growing opportunity for drinks as well. So a third of consumers find drinks delivery appealing, alcoholic drinks. And for the core consumers we've talked about, those drinking out at least weekly, that raises to over half of those consumers. So when we're thinking about menus, if delivery is going to be a part of the proposition, then we need to think about maximising the opportunity for drinks as well as food. Again, we've seen some great initiatives in this space, from click and collect cocktails and draft beer growler fills to suppliers partnering with third-party delivery services. For operators, they're looking at this as an incremental revenue opportunity, and suppliers need to be doing the same. So this leads us on to what's next for the on-trade once outlets begin to reopen from this weekend. And I think the great news there is that we're seeing a lot of pent-up demand from consumers who can't wait to get back out into trade. So this comes from a piece of research we've done recently with UK Hospitality, focused on consumers who visit the trade at least once a month pre-lockdown. And what we're seeing there is that almost half of those are telling us that they plan to visit the sector within the first few weeks, and more than 70% within the first 2 months. And the other good news as well is that the fantastic work that we've seen from both operators and suppliers through initiatives to support the NHS or to feed the homeless, for example, is not going to be forgotten. So 70% of consumers have told us they're more likely to visit retail brands who have offered services during the crisis. And 3/4 of consumers are more likely to purchase products from brands who have behaved ethically. So making these available on menu could drive some incremental sales. But on the flip side, we do know that overall frequency of visit will decline. So a third of consumers are telling us that they will visit the on-trade less frequently than they did so pre-lockdown. However, we do expect any significant decline to be short-term, and this is highlighted by the consumer intent to spend over the next 12 months. So in the first 6 months, we are going to see a reduction. On the left-hand side here, we can see that 33% are planning on reducing their spend, and only 13% will be increasing their spend. Whereas if we fast forward to a year from now, we see that those numbers have leveled off significantly, and with the vast majority happy to be spending the same level that they were pre-lockdown, it's really encouraging that we could be back to pre-COVID levels of spend within 12 months. And when we break that intention to visit down by the level of engagement that we saw pre-lockdown, we can see that the core consumers are most keen to get back. So a lot of numbers on this slide, apologies, but what we're looking at here in the top left is the consumers who are visiting the trade most frequently pre-COVID are those most likely to return. And at the bottom right, we see that it's the consumers who were the least frequent visitors into the on-trade pre-COVID who are still unsure or are telling us already that they're not going to be coming back. However, they do represent much less of an opportunity, as like I said, they were going out much less frequently in the first place. So I think the challenge then becomes around this middle group of consumers that we've highlighted in orange here. These are important consumers to the trade because they're out reasonably frequently, but they do want to see precautions put in place before they come back. And when they do come back, they're going to be cautious. So looking at which precautions they'd actually like to see. No massive surprises there. They're looking for distancing measures and hygiene measures are going to be key. But they're also looking at things like contactless payment and ordering and outdoor space. I think contactless payment and ordering is a really interesting one. It gives another dynamic altogether to drinks menus and sort of raises questions around within each category which brands are going to be listed at the top of those menus. But one thing that's clear really is that whilst consumers want to be back into the on-trade, they're still reluctant to be in close proximity to others and they don't want to be in busy places. So this is reflected in where operator business leaders expect that consumers will be going once the trade is reopened. So 2/3 of them say that consumers are going to be avoiding town and city centres, and half are saying that there will be an increased desire to support local. So we are seeing that in our consumer research as well, but I think it's important to understand that for some, the city centre is their home, and therefore city centre outlets are their local outlets. So whilst 40% of those that live in suburbs are concerned about going back into city centres, actually for those that live there, that number is only 15%. So city centres with a high residential population are going to do well. And I think the most important thing is just to be playing where the people are. And when consumers do come back, we're going to see a change in the mix of occasions for which they do visit the on-trade. People are going to be reluctant to visit for high tempo occasions, busy occasions, so late night gigs, sporting events, that kind of thing. But they're really keen to get back for catching up with friends and family, for celebrations, date nights, that kind of thing. So it's important that menus cater to those occasions and also enable consumers to treat and reward. I think the inclusion of regular everyday occasions on both lists here is just highlights that polarization in consumer mindset, which we need to be wary of. So some consider this occasion too risky, where for the others, getting back to normality is their top priority. And one of the other changes that we're expecting to see really is a reduction in group sizes, especially whilst we're still socializing in bubbles. And in our research in China, we've seen this come through as well. So half of consumers in China are now going out in smaller groups than they were pre-COVID, and only 5% are going out in larger groups. So this needs to be considered on menus as well. So for categories where sharing is quite common, so for example, a good range of wines by the glass would be needed. But this all needs to be done in as simple a way as possible, because simplification of the operations is going to be key for operators with reduced staff behind the bar. And actually what operators are telling us is that many of them are going to be looking at reducing the range overall. So 28% cutting back their drinks range to just the core items. I think cocktails look to be the hardest hit within that, because speed and consistency of serve are going to take priority. So I think for spirit suppliers, ensuring that your brands can be delivered through simple cocktail serves is going to be key to retaining listings on the cocktail menu. But it's important that if we're reducing ranges that we still provide enough choice for consumers to have the options at both ends of the price ladder. And one of the things that we've seen in China, where consumers have suffered similar financial implications to those in the UK, is polarization in drinks choice. So 27% of consumers are telling us that they're only choosing value brands, and we've seen 2 percentage points growth in that number since pre-COVID. And meanwhile, 55% are telling us that they're only choosing premium brands, and we've seen 3 percentage points growth in that number since pre-lockdown. And really encouraging, what we're seeing at the bottom is that overall spend per head on alcohol has gone up for those people that are drinking out. I think it's really key then that we continue to provide options at both ends of the price ladder. And also what's going to be key is that staff who are now providing table service, sometimes for the first time, have been trained to make sure that they are trading consumers up where possible and maximising the opportunity from drinks. So then finally from me, before I hand back to Laura, just want to finish on a real positive for the coming weekend. And again, taken from our recent research with UK hospitality, with those who used to visit at least once a month, what we're seeing is that 29% of those are actually likely to visit on the 4th of July. So we're set for a really great day's trading on Saturday, and we need to ensure that we get our drinks ranges right from the offset. So just to summarise from me, I think consumers will return, but the mix of occasions will change, and we need to make sure that we're catering to those new occasions that consumers will visit for most. There are some key trends from before lockdown, so health, premiumisation and experience, which need strong consideration. These are driving choice of venue, where to visit, so we need to have them on the menu. And we should also consider what consumers have been drinking, as well as what they have clearly missed during the lockdown, in order to maximise the opportunity on their return. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. So just a few practical things, because we've had some questions. Firstly, yes, the presentation will be available afterwards. This video will be on demand, so you can share it with your colleagues and talk about the results together. If you have got an echo or you've got an error message, if you refresh the page, it should probably help. Generally, there isn't an echo, but we understand that some people have got that. So those two things, have a little think about. So that's so much data to think about. So much has changed in where businesses are going. So just to ask Lorraine and Kieran, what does that mean for your drinks menus? Do you want to have a start, Lorraine? What are you going to be doing differently?
I think the data speaks volumes in that, and I think it's our expectation that the frequency of guests visiting venues, along with the sizes, are definitely going to shift. But the real consistent is the expectation on offer around premiumisation and no and low. And these are solutions that were already in our businesses prior, and they'll continue to be, within the businesses post. I guess where we'll need to really be smart is around those range sizes. Just simply because obviously demand going to fall. We know that a lot of no and low products have a relatively short shelf life. And so it definitely will be more of the same with huge amounts of operational simplicity, just because the operation will change hugely as a result of the health and safety requirements of COVID. So operational simplicity is going to be essential.
So does that mean a reduction in the size of your menu so it's easier to manage everything within your venue?
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah. Is that the same for you, Kieran? Will you be just, concertinaing your menu into smaller offer?
Yes. I mean, it's very encouraging to see that this sort of decade of premiumization is going to continue, because there would be a temptation to some operators to, if volume is going to go down, then GP becomes really key, and the temptation could be to go at a lower price level. But the data is suggesting that customers don't want that, and that they still want that premium option. How we actually get, how the experience of going to a pub in the new normal will be, that will be the challenge. Is instead of having 200 products on your back bar, how do you get those products in front of customers without that sort of back bar browsing?
So I'm hearing
they still expect and want a range of premium products.
So I'm hearing the fact that you think premiumisation is still important, and it's important in your overall profits, but people won't be able to see those brands behind the bar. It will now all be about face-to-face interaction with your staff. Does that mean you're amending your staff training in any way?
Well, I think staff knowledge will become even more important than it is now. Innovation around displays and whatnot, but having a staff members that know their product range is going to be key.
Yeah.
They're going to have so much on their plate anyway that it's probably not the most important thing at the minute. But once they're settled in and back to work, knowing what they're talking about around their products is key.
Yeah, I think that, for Corbin and King, we pride ourselves on staff training, and brand knowledge is something always at the forefront of what we do, for sure. And I do think that brand loyalty will come into play hugely, where, consumers will more than likely want the products, brands that they recognize and know, because of the level of comfort that will bring also. I don't know if newness is going to be as big of an interest area as it had been prior to COVID. New brands.
And that's the issue, isn't it? Which is, if people don't know brands by name, they may just go for the usual and not explore anything new. Johnny, in what you've seen in the data, do you think this will favour existing brands over new brands? And do you think that will be a challenge for some of the newer products in the market?
Yeah, I think Lorraine's right. I think people are going to look for tried and trusted brands, really. But one of the key things that we did see driving consumer choice before lockdown was that want to experiment. So I think that still needs to be there to some degree. But perhaps the levels of innovation that we were seeing before lockdown will fall away somewhat. And as we've discussed, we think that ranges on the whole are probably going to reduce as opposed to growing, which obviously gives limited opportunity for suppliers to get new listings in. So I think it's going to be key that those tried and trusted brands are front of mind and clearly signposted on the menu. But it would still be a good idea to give consumers the opportunity to experiment around that as well.
I guess the big challenge will be that people have trusted brands, but there'll be brands that you might use or types of delivery that you might use that might be more suitable for the occasion. So, for example, there's a question here about cocktails. Is it that if demand for cocktails is down, are people going to start looking on YouTube to make cocktails at home? Do you think that's the case, Johnny? I think cocktails are quite complicated. They're part of an experience, aren't they? So.
Yes, and I think it's not so much that demand has been down. I think consumers are still massively engaged with the cocktail category. It's just that they've not been able to replicate that experience at home. We've seen similar with craft beer. We've seen similar with ale, particularly for brands that work better on cask, where consumers just haven't been able to get that same drinking experience at home. So they really are looking forward to coming back into the trade and having that experience again. Cocktails, though, does present a massive challenge to that operational simplicity that Lorraine is talking about. So I think the cocktail menu needs a rethink in terms of what can we serve consistently, simply and quick, but that still hits the mark for consumers who want that cocktail experience.
So do you think that there may be a little bit more of a market for pre-batched cocktails or ready-to-drink products? Is that something you might be looking at in your venues, Kieran?
Well, we have sort of been bubbling away under the surface for quite a while now, draft cocktails, and the question or the concern has always been, are they, can they be done in a premium way? Which, with people coming back to pubs expecting a premium experience, draft cocktails may not kind of tick that box. But then on the flip side, people clearly want their cocktails when they come back as well. So I think draft is an option for certain outlets, but a simpler cocktail menu with some simple serves done well and safely, obviously, that will be very, very successful, I would imagine.
Yeah, agree.
What about you, Lorraine? Do you think that it might change, even though you might not be looking to expand your range, might it change your form of delivery of types of drinks?
I think for our venues, bearing in mind that we are primarily restaurants, we have one sort of destination bar in Bar Americaine. So, within the core estate, we don't have elaborate lists of cocktails. We have quite a tidy and neat range within the large part. So, as a general rule for our business, I think for cocktails, we're already in quite a simple, classics, tidy range that's in place. Bar Americaine that presents a different type of challenge, but without a shadow of a doubt, simplicity is key without detracting away from that premium experience that we consistently will uphold within our venues.
I mean, it's very much that cocktails have been an experience part of going out to a venue. And is there other ways that we can replicate experience or use the new drinks menu to do that? Maybe you need to make your own cocktails at the table. I don't know. But are there ways that you're looking at in terms of still creating a sense of experience, even though it's now going to be at table delivery?
It's an interesting question, and it's one that we haven't got to the complete answer on yet. I think that, again, our bars are experiential led as far as service goes, but it's not like, a Mr. Fox where you're going to have potions on the table being created. So I think for the business and the business model that we have, I think we'll consistently still be able to deliver what we do at a very high level, just more refined range.
Cool. So just letting people know that I have got all your questions. I'm batching them up together. There's a really interesting question about how we can use technology to give people that browsing experience. That's still also fraught with touch screens and all sorts of other hands-on elements. Have you guys been exploring any of that? Or CJ, have you seen that anywhere else, particularly in China, where you've been looking at what they've been doing?
Well, what we have seen is that menus being available on mobile phone is becoming a lot more prevalent. So in the States, there are a lot of outlets where you just scan a QR code on your way into the outlet. The menu then becomes available on your mobile phone. For a lot of those, you can also place your orders then and pay through that same platform. So we have seen a lot more of that in the US, and we're expecting to see that here as well. We know that a lot of suppliers are moving into that mobile ordering and payment space in order to cater to that demand.
And are you guys implementing any of that in venue?
No.
I think moving toward these are all great ideas, and moving towards apps and whatnot. I just don't know if they would capture the hundreds and hundreds of SKUs. Someone's going to sit there and do a lot of admin work and data entry work to get those products live. And I think that is where the menu will get smaller, and maybe not even the menu itself, but the sales, the volumes, the tail that we have. We have our pouring brand and a long tail of products. That tail will be under severe pressure. Our distributors will also, do the distributors want to have a warehouse full of products that, aren't moving? So there may be pressure from them to reduce the range. It's going to be a challenge for new brands to establish themselves in the sort of post-COVID world.
Yeah, I think some of them have been doing some great work on going direct to consumer. So maybe the consumers will begin to stimulate that demand.
Also, people have had 3 months sitting at home drinking. Maybe a new brand has been discovered that we're not quite aware of yet. There may be new brands that have happened in the last 3 months, new trends that the customers will bring back to the pubs.
And so what I'm hearing here is in some ways some little bit of caution before running in and spending, potentially tens of thousands of pounds on new apps and things like that, beginning to see what the market's doing and beginning to look at that data. How will you be using your data behind the till, Lorraine, in order to shape what goes forward? Because it is slightly all unknown, and there's the data from the CPA, but it's what happens in your venue that's important. Yeah. How will you be analysing that?
Yeah, I mean, data is going to be absolutely essential, I think, for us from this coming Saturday and beyond. Data as far as the new trends that are emerging, because as you said, the CGA data is super insightful, and it's based upon people theorizing their intention, but the actual sales data is going to tell us, the real actual on what's starting to materialize on sales trends, on shifts versus where we were. So we will personally use not only sales data, but we'll also use market data and overlay the two to create a picture, because obviously the more data we collect over longer periods of time, the better informed we're going to be to project what the future looks like. So it's going to be absolutely essential for all purchasing decisions across the business in the new world, because I bet we don't have a benchmark to the period that we're about to enter.
Is that the same for you and Fuller's, Kieran? You're different types of venue.
Data is everything, and we have such a range of outlets now, from sort of city pubs in a square mile to rural pubs in Hampshire, and that will be really interesting to see that. We have seen the boom of flavoured gins has actually been stronger in our rural pubs than our city pubs, which until you look at the data, you probably wouldn't expect that. So seeing that data, we can go down to sort of day by day level and site by site level, and seeing the geographical spread of trends will be key. Again, it's giving the operators, they're the experts. They know their demographic better than people seeing at head office. So giving them the capabilities to tweak things and move things around to suit their customers is key as well,
And Johnny, what will you be looking at come the 4th of July? What data are you going to begin to look at in the UK that will begin to inform some of this?
Yeah, I think probably very different to what we have looked at in the past to a certain extent. I think we've been very focused on trends, and now benchmarking versus last year feels a little bit pointless. So people will be looking at what happens from the 4th of July onwards and very much benchmarking their own performance versus a sector average. So we will be delivering that sector average for you to benchmark against. And we'll be also fast tracking which outlets are open and trading, so that we can help our supplier clients to target those outlets and make sure that they're getting the support they need to deliver that offer and that experience. So it's almost a fresh start from day one, really, and changing our reporting based on that.
And I guess also looking at what else is happening in countries that have unlocked slightly before us as well, which leads to that really interesting question about the fact that if everyone's been drinking a premium product at home for a vastly reduced price than what they would buy it when they're out, do we really think people will stick with paying for premium when they're out in venue?
I think so, yeah. I think, for the most part, we've always seen that price difference between on and off trade, and that's never really hindered consumers in on trade from wanting to step up their experience with a more premium serve. I think there's also less risk to a certain, well, for a lot of categories, for buying a more premium serve in the on-trade. Within spirits, for example, you can try a single spirit mixer from a premium category, whereas in the off-trade, you'd have to purchase a full bottle of that spirits in order to get the same experience. So price gap is a concern, but I think it's always been there, and consumers have still been choosing premium in the on-trade.
So no difference really in that decision making, but maybe, you know, if you come back to your data where you say that people are still looking at this as a treat experience, that they're really looking forward to coming back for that, then not skimping on their drink is probably part of that treat, right? So
yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, don't get me wrong, we've got more than 80% of consumers who are concerned about their own financial situation, and we're heading into a recession, basically. But what we saw in the 2008-2009 recession was that's what gave birth to drinks premiumization, really. Back then, we were talking about a consumer group that we labeled the weekend millionaire. They weren't going out during the week anymore, but on their one big visit to the trade at weekend, they wanted to treat themselves and they wanted to trade up to a premium product.
Cool. There's a really interesting question about training. So obviously, clearly, you're going to need to train your staff on your new menus, along with a load of other COVID-related stuff. You know, what's the best way for drinks brands to support you in that training? Are you looking for brand ambassadors to come along, or do you just want them to leave you alone for a while? Is there any way that as a whole sector we can begin to support venues in that training piece? Lorraine, is there...
Yeah, I think, you know, bearing in mind that our restarting point will be working within the brand partnerships that, you know, we had pre-COVID. So because there wasn't necessarily newness of brands, I think the starting point will be us being able to pick up where we left off, retrain the teams, ready them for service thereafter. I think brand support ongoing is going to be essential, and as essential as it always has been, actually. You know, for us as a business, we have several spirits partners, for instance, who we work with on an ongoing basis. We have an L&D team, and so the support's going to continue as was. But we are more than likely to utilize it in different ways, because not forgetting that when we reopen, there's a whole learning that not only our teams, our guests will be going through, understanding how to now navigate in these spaces with the restrictions on social distancing, on PPE and all these other factors. And so for me personally, it's not the case of sitting here saying what that future is going to look like on how we work with brands. It's going to be a step-by-step approach into the new world, and then assess and continue to take training from there onwards. But we'll absolutely still be relying on those partnerships that we previously had.
Kieran, what about you guys?
Sorry, a little one's come in there. We do a lot of our training online, which is really helpful. And it kind of goes back, and that will always be key. And I guess what we would ask of brand ambassadors and suppliers is just bear with us for the first sort of 3 or 4 weeks while we've got hospitality staff that are basically relearning their job in a new world. But being safe is obviously number one priority, but serving drinks in the best way possible and making the experience the best experience it can be is also very important. And it goes back to the point about, you know, we are asking customers to pay more than they would do if they were drinking at home. So the experience is so important. So training will be key, and it will be massive. And we'll say we do a lot online, which makes it a bit safer. But in terms of sort of doorstepping and wandering around our site, I would just say, you know, maybe for the first couple of weeks, we let our staff learn the new normal.
Well, we've built our online training for low and no for staff, so I shall come and talk to you about that, because that's been one of the things that we've managed over this period. Have you seen training be a big thing in the other countries which have opened before us at all, or do you have any data on that at all, Jonathan?
Yeah, well, we actually own a training business. So we own a business called CPL Learning. And we've been doing a lot with training during lockdown. So we've been giving a lot of our training courses out for free to people that are out on furlough. We've trained over 100,000 team members in over 250,000 courses during that time. And what we're seeing is a shift towards online. So CPL has both an online business and a face-to-face business, and even the face-to-face training is now happening online. So there is a big shift that way. And things like seller to glass training, making sure that people are serving products as best as they can and as safely as they can, but also training on upsell. I think without the consumer at the bar being physically exposed to all of the different brands and products, it's much more important now that the people waiting tables are able to trade consumers up in order to maximise spend. So there'll be a lot of training going on from that perspective as well.
Cool. Another thing about the menus is, do you think you might be, there's a couple of interesting things. People may want to stay more local to go out, so they don't have to use public transport, or they may drive. How might that influence your menu? How might also the idea that people might think they can't socially distance if their inhibitions are too loosened by alcohol, and may that affect some of your menu choices? And may there even be some different choices between city and non-city or local venues? Are any of those things influencing your menus in Corbin and King or Fuller's?
Well, we've always championed local products, particularly more around the draft range. Draft beer lends itself to much more local products. And we have tried to get a bit more of a grown-up range of soft drinks, low and no. Again, low and no draft beers. The days have gone where you can just have lime and soda and a Pepsi or Coke. The data is showing that people want that, and in the day we're driven by the demands of our customers. So our range of low and no is much better than where it was. It could still be better, and it sounds like that's what the customers are demanding. So I think there's still more work to be done on it, but it is getting better. Is
the idea that you can attract people in at lunchtime, so spread your customers over a whole day if you've got a slightly different lunchtime offer, particularly people who might be working at home, which may not have been the case near some of your venues before?
I think on that, I think, what we absolutely expect, especially with our restaurants within the centre of London, is that there are a large proportion of people that just won't be going into the office. And so that will absolutely impact lunchtime trade. But as far as us, in terms of no and low, that has been a consistent offering across, whether it be local neighbourhood restaurants or within central London. And we'll see a shift in the mix in accordance to location, but it's not the case of getting into the minutiae of fine-tuning every single menu dependent on neighbourhood or central London. The offering broadly will at this stage and remain fairly similar. But I guess that's where the data piece, once we go live, will be absolutely critical in terms of really understanding where further tweaks and changes will need to be made.
I think it goes back to the staff training as well. It's felt like in the past, sort of going through the motions, having a nice fridge full of soft drinks. You've ticked that box. Whereas without the people browsing at bars and looking in fridges, staff training and knowledge of their products in low and no, maybe more so than anywhere else, is really important.
So there's a really interesting question here about the fact that if you've got all this bar space, it's no longer going to be used. Are there some merchandising opportunities there? Is there ways that brands can help you use that space? Imagine people won't necessarily be even looking at the bar, I guess. What do you see that relationship with the bar being?
I'm sure there's some really creative people out there that will have some amazing ideas of what to do. Marketing isn't my role.
Mind you, that I suspect there may be some very big perspex screens around some of it as well. So it's going to be a really, it might not be prime advertising real estate that some people might think. And what are you going to do with clients or customers who are expecting that same level of service that you've always had and might not be able to deliver? Again, you may, particularly in Fuller's, have a large range of car scales that might have a shorter shelf life. How are you going to be able to deal with those expectations for the purists who still want the cocktail to be thrown across the bar, the car scale?
I mean, so far in the last sort of 45 minutes, we've exclusively spoken about spirits and soft drinks, and I think draft beer is a category which probably got more risk than any of the others. just the short shelf life, the risk of relocking down and people being stuck with cellars full of product again, which is horrible. If your back bar's full of spirits, they'll sit there gathering dust for a few months and it's not a problem. So you're limited by the number of taps anyway. So but I do feel that stock holding will be massively a lot smaller. So there's going to be higher risks of out of stocks. It's about how we explain that to customers. I mean, everyone is fully aware of what is going on. If we are talking to them as grown-ups and explaining the situation, I'm sure then there won't be any issues there. But I would expect that stock holding on draft beer, ranging on draft beer, will be a lot smaller. So, and until we get some data about how much we are selling, we're kind of just sticking our finger in the air about what to order on that for Saturday. We could have 6 firkins on Saturday and they all go in 20 minutes, or we could be sat there with 5 at the end of the day. And until we get some data coming in, we just don't know.
Do you think there will also be, are you particularly around the Fullers, because you've got quite a wide geographical side, are you pulling on the keep local message? Are you going to be encouraging people to support the local business? Will you be looking at maybe more local brands to put behind the bar to piggyback off that sense of support
to be fair,
local?
on Cask, we are pretty strong on our local, sort of our local stuff. I guess the messaging needs to be right about to the customers about particularly Cask. Everyone knows if they are a Cask drinker and they have some knowledge of the product, they know that it is a very short window of when they can sell it. And what we don't want to do is get into a situation where we can't sell it in 4 days, or it's starting to go bad. You sell less of it. It's just a never-ending cycle. Our craft credentials on our keg products may be a bit. We may have to sort of narrow them down a bit. Again, the pubs with 20 taps, for instance, they're few and far between. But it's just about a bit of common sense, really. We can't just open on that Saturday with 20 new kegs on and hope that it all works out.
Jonathan, are you seeing the consumer far more interested in local, going local, drinking local, buying local, supporting those venues that they felt supported everyone during COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. I think not just from a safety perspective where people won't want to be getting on public transport and going into town and city centres. What we have seen is just a real engagement from consumers with their local venues. As we saw in the presentation, 1/3 of consumers have been actively looking to support their local venues, be that through pre-purchasing vouchers or doing delivery, or a lot of outlets that have been doing sort of take-out beer through growler fills and things like that. So there has been a real demand from consumers to support local, and we expect that will continue when the trade opens.
And Jonathan, can I ask you another question about the consumers coming back? Because you did mention it, but there's also a question. It's definitely younger people are coming back with far more abandon and positivity than others, isn't it? So,
yeah, absolutely. There is a bit of a feeling of being bulletproof amongst some of the younger consumers. So we do expect that they'll be the first back to trade, really. Similarly, with the point around it being the most engaged consumers pre-COVID-19. A lot of those were the younger consumers, the 18 to 34-year-olds. And obviously, the disease has impacted them less as well. So there is more of a feeling from those consumers that they're happy to come back, either immediately or with just a few precautions in place.
And it's that middle age range that needs a bit more persuading to come back. And I guess both for Fuller's and Corbin, that's quite a big part of your market. How are you going to begin to attract those people back through the doors and give, there's one thing about giving them confidence, but still getting them through the doors is quite hard. I know you're not the marketing people, but do you know some of the things that you might be doing to encourage that?
The key issue for us is the sort of office drinks in the city of London, specifically. Now they are key, the pubs around sort of the Bank and Canary Wharf and whatnot. I guess the worrying thing is when will they be back in the office en masse? And we just don't know. So our pubs in the I guess, suburban areas, the commuter belts, the ones who are working from home and such like. There's less concerns around there, but there is an issue around the office drinks, and I don't know what we do about that really. I mean, if they're not in the office, we might be going for office drinks.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, there's definitely going to be some. The City of London councillors tell me that they don't expect the city to be back in full swing for quite a long time. So there would definitely be different parts of the country and city versus out of town that will be affected differently, and you're really going to have to see how those work. Yeah. There is no. I guess what that says to me is we need to have some follow-up webinars to this one, which look at some of the real-time stuff that's happening as we reopen and the learning that we're finding. Do the panel have views on consumers wearing masks in venues?
Views.
Is it expected? Are you going to ask people? What happens if people have to move them to eat? Oh, this is so fraught. I mean, it is. I mean, they're down off people's noses within minutes on the tube.
I have to check what our guidelines are. I don't believe we are telling them they have to for customers or for staff, but I'd have to check that. It's all back down to if we're going to get people back in the pub spending money, we need to be careful that we are not almost arrogant enough to think they will just come back. If the experience isn't good enough and it isn't a great experience, then we're going to struggle. So whilst 100% it needs to be safe, it needs to be enjoyable, and it needs to be the best it can be. So that my answer today, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately that they're in the venues to eat and drink, right? And so doing so with a mask on presents challenges at best, unless it's for them, So,
yeah, there are many other measures that pubs are putting in place for that protection, I think. So, I'm not sure if you've been doing this so far, but will delivery become a key part of your offer? Will you start doing that again, doing delivery food and drink, Corbin and King?
We are at the moment. We've got an at-home service which launched about 3 weeks ago. So that is something that we are doing. In terms of ongoing, again, it will be kind of a broader conversation, business decision as to whether it makes sense to continue it once the core business is back up and running. So yeah, that's where we are at the moment with it.
Yeah, we do a little bit of click and collect, but very, very small amount. I guess it is a question for sort of 4 weeks' time when we've been open for a few weeks and we'll see.
And Johnny, is that data that CGA has been collecting, which is who's been doing that and how successful that is? I mean, you mentioned the coat at home. I hate getting their emails; they make me feel really hungry. So my crap food here. But is there some data on the growth of that and how that's going for venues?
Yeah, I mean, I've not got sales data on delivery, but we have got consumer data that shows that there's been a massive uptick in consumers that are looking for delivery and that are ordering delivery, not just from the usual takeaways, but from pubs and restaurants. And what they're telling us there is that those aren't just lockdown habits. They've really enjoyed that, and they're saying that those habits are going to continue going forward. So we know that a lot of operators are now looking at delivery more seriously than they were as an additional revenue stream. I think probably about a year or 2 years ago, we were looking at the impact on brand equity from offering delivery. And at the time, there was a bit of a negative impact on brand equity because it's quite hard to deliver the same experience once the food's been in a car for 20 minutes. But actually, that started to fall away during lockdown, and particularly for the operators that have been supporting the NHS or feeding the homeless and those kind of things, there's actually been an uptick in brand equity from their delivery services as well. So I think it's a much more viable option now as a secondary revenue stream.
Yeah, I've been quite taken by the fact that places like Fugitive Motel are now doing a home delivery around the M25, and they're selling lots of low and no as well as alcohol. But there's something about if you're doing a weekly shop, bottles take up a lot of room, and that's the one thing you wouldn't mind getting delivered because they're also quite heavy. So whether there is that opportunity for venues get those interesting premium brands in for takeaway, for home delivery within a small area. There's still not a lot of choice of drinks, alcohol or alcohol-free. I'm not only obsessed by alcohol-free, honestly, people, but the choice of alcohol is quite low rather than premium on Deliveroo and stuff like that. And whether that might be another opportunity to get those premium brands into people's hands.
Yeah, and what consumers are telling us is that they want to see the full food and drink menu available for delivery. It's not just about getting the food. They do want to be able to choose drinks from their restaurants and pubs as well.
Yeah, it's not just about a big bottle of Sprite. That's a bit boring, isn't it? So cool. Do you think? I mean, some of this has been answered, but which is about tried and tested brands. But I know you're going to be putting a lot of what you know on the menu. There are lots of new brands out there who want your attention. What's your advice for them right now in order to be able to talk to you about what they have? Because they're all they want to get their businesses going, but they realise we're in a new situation now. Can they send you sales people?
What I would say, I'm sure we've all experienced this, is during this time being inundated on LinkedIn by new suppliers. And the reality is, especially for my team, that the key priority is to mobilise supply. In the short term, it's really to mobilise supply and ensure that we can continue to consistently trade with the current suppliers that we have, and really get the business back off the ground. Unless there is a pressing demand, such as PPE or something from a health and safety perspective that we have to then seek out and buy, then obviously that actually comes before mobilisation. But new products, in my view, it's just not a priority at the moment. And so I would suggest holding fire for about a month and then reaching out, because after a month we'll have some data. We'll start to understand where our guests are at in terms of their expectation on newness, and then we can react accordingly. But for the first 4 to 5 weeks, it's really going to be about mobilising the business.
Yeah. What about you, Kieran?
Well, I think that sums up perfectly, really. We're not just going to be able to add new products in the next couple of weeks, at least. I would, if I was them, I would be talking to the routes to market first. Making sure they've got a good relationship. They know who the person is at Matthew Clark or Next or whoever. But spend the time building relationships there, because I don't know what their views are going to be, but I imagine that they are not going to be too keen on adding new products themselves. So if they have a relationship with them, that's a good starting point.
Yeah, I do think, part of the new normal is about collaboration, but you need to have time to do collaboration. I can see, you being able to provide your cocktail at home with some products you have along with your food, and then a video with someone like La Maison Wellness, and being able to give people a really interesting experience. But finding time in your diaries and attention for that collaboration might be quite difficult. So
yeah, and
we have to wait.
Our staff, the hospitality staff have had a horrible 3 months, and they're going to go. They have to go back to work now and basically learn a new role. And the key thing is staying safe. So I think we need to make sure that they do that first before we start bombarding them with new SKUs and new serves and new ranges. We have exactly. And at the time, I think the data from Johnny shows that people will come back, and eventually we will be able to sit down face to face and have some great discussions about new products and exciting new stuff, because there will be some amazing stuff out there that has only just started in the last sort of 3 months that unfortunately we just won't be able to take straight away.
Cool. And can I just confirm with you guys, if you currently don't have an off-premises license, that doesn't matter at the moment, does it? Anyone can deliver off premises at the minute.
Yeah, I think it's been waived.
Yeah, I'm with your local authority, but I'm pretty sure that is the case.
And I imagine that might change in some licensing circles as we go forward. I think I've managed to get to all the questions. So thank you guys for all of that. I think there's definitely a little bit of we have to wait and see, and there'll be some new data and some new experiences coming through, and we'll be able to see some of that. And I know that will frustrate a lot of people, but I think the venues are certainly having a challenging time as it is. So thank you very much for your time today. Johnny, were you, how are you collecting data going forward, and where would that sort of be shared?
Yeah, so I mean, we're collecting all of the same data that we have been. So we receive EPOS data from around 7,500 outlets. We'll be looking at that on a daily basis, and we'll be communicating that on a daily basis. We also hold a lot of data around the outlet universe, so we'll be talking about how many outlets are open and trading. And we've also done a great partnership with Wireless Social so that we can track footfall as well. So we can tell you where's open, what's being sold, and where the people are.
Cool. Thank you so much. Just also to let anybody know that Club Soda has launched with the Drinks Trust a free course for staff in the hospitality and drinks sector to help them change their drinking habits, whether that's to cut down or stop for a bit or quit. So if you want access to that for any of your staff, do email me at laura@joinclubsoda.co.uk. We're really pleased that we've been able to introduce that during this period to help anybody in the sector. So thanks very much, everyone, for watching this session today. It's part of Imbibe Online, supported by Mezcal Centre. I'd like to thank our guests, Lorraine, Kieran and Johnny, and the supporter for this session, which is Mr. J. As we said at the beginning, all sessions are available to watch on demand afterwards. And don't forget, there's plenty more sessions over the next 2 days. So make sure you check out the rest of the programme. Coming up next at 2 o'clock is the Industry Matters panel on From Survive to Thrive, what's in store for hospitality over the next 12 to 18 months and how to get there. I can sense there might be some more crystal ball gazing and some uncertainty still, but some of the questions you asked here are certainly relevant to that session as well. So do keep posted, and you can also watch all those sessions afterwards. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to end it there, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Cheers.